3rd, 2023 meeting of the Greensboro City Council. We are in the Katie Dorsett Council Chamber. People wishing to speak must sign up by 6 o'clock by using the QMinder kiosk just outside the council door. Please see the courier for assistance. Let the record reflect that all members are in attendance. Please silence any electronic devices. If you must make or receive a phone call, kindly do so from outside the chamber. We will begin tonight's meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. Mr. Matheny, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At tonight's meeting, Council will consider a couple of postponed items from the May 2nd and May 16 meetings of the Greensboro City Council. Speakers will be allowed to address Council on specific agenda items and will be allotted 3 minutes for comments. The City of Greensboro is committed to promoting an environment that is free of discrimination, bias, and bullying. Zoom participants are requested to mute their microphones until they are called upon to speak. All meeting attendees are expected to respect the speakers and council deliberations. People disrupting the meeting will be removed from the meeting. By statute, council must vote on all items unless there is a direct financial interest. Our first public hearing item is E1, which is a public hearing for an ordinance amending the Greensboro Land Ordinance in relation to short-term rentals. I do have a list of people who have signed up to speak. I would like to offer a few things for consideration before we start. I know that there has been a lot of discussion regarding a separation between short-term rentals. I would like to suggest that we include a 750-foot separation between STRs.
Do you want a resolution for each one of these?
Well, just in case there's a split. Do I have a motion to?
So moved.
Would that be outside of vested properties?
Well, there is no. Keep in mind
Right.
there's no listing right now.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So
I think we have to, yeah, I move it. Well, either one, it doesn't matter, but
Is there a second?
second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That passes 8-1. That adds a separation.
Now, that adds a separation, Yvonne, because, you know,
Okay.
ma'am,
750.
750.
3 football fields. I know what it is, but I think that's still too close.
The second item that we were going to add it would be to delete the 2-night minimum requirement.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Are you a yay or a nay? All right, so that passes.
Council, please use your microphones.
Excuse me? Use our mic. My mic is on. And then there's been a lot of conversation about parking. My mic is on.
It's on. I heard you.
Excuse me? Others, okay. There's been a lot of discussion about parking, and I believe the way that it's written into the ordinance is that short-term rentals have to comply with parking regulations as they currently are. The Senate bill had something that was a little bit more stringent, which I think we liked, which would limit parking to 1 car per bedroom. So if it was a 3-bedroom house, it would limit it to 3 cars. Unlike the way that it's written is It's whatever the neighborhood parking is, and right now there are no parking restrictions in neighborhoods. Of course, if you are a homeowners association and you've got something stronger than this, it would be up to whatever the homeowners association is.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Holston.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Thurm. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that passes 9-0. There have also been discussions regarding an insurance requirement, which I believe we all agree the insurance requirement needs to be included. But my understanding is that would be in a zoning permit, not in the ordinance. So while it will not be reflected in the ordinance, the zoning permit would require insurance. I just thought we'd take a vote on that to confirm that. Moved by Mrs. Hoffman, seconded by Dr. Wells. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 9-0. The reason why we did this at the beginning of the meeting is because we knew that many people were here that had concerns specifically for those items, and we wanted to let you know that we've heard you, and we wanted to make you aware of those. Many of us have met with neighborhoods, and these were items that seemed to be in agreement with council. So I'm just going to call people in the manner that they were signed up. So if you would move to the window side of the room, Melvin Manuel, followed by Randy Little, followed by Dottie Erickson. And if you would just give us your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Melvin Manuel. I'm here for kind of a little bit different reason, but it is associated with this. It's my understanding that currently the way this works, if you have a short-term rental, you charge a fee, and that income or revenue goes to the property owner. It is also my understanding that currently the way it's set up, the expense for all that, as far as administrative, law enforcement, fire department, all that is being paid for by the city. And it's my view that the short-term rentals should be self-funding, because there's at least over 99% of the property owners here that do not have short-term rentals. And therefore, the way it works out in your budget, they're subsidizing the short-term rentals in the revenue that they're getting. I've talked with the planning department, the budget department, Nancy, your office. Everybody could not have been more informative, nicer. They've been just great to work with. And at the budget department, we were trying to analytically figure out how we could make this happen, particularly where it came to fire and the police. And so we came up with the idea of matching the databases of the short-term rentals and see how many times the fire police had been out and what the cost of that was. It turned out that I was flabbergasted to find out that the city of Greensboro does not know where the so many 600 or so y'all say do not have a clue where those short rentals are located. That's a problem. And then on top of that, it's my understanding that if all this goes through, that the city is going to hire a third party, which will cost, and again, the 99% that don't get it, to locate these people. In my discussions with them, I said, okay, once you can do all that, if we could do all the analytical work, you could tag the permit with the sufficient amount of money that would cover so they'd be self-funding. And then you could just have a renewal like you do the license plate every year. I was under the, they got back with me in connection with that renewal that had been tried in Wilmington, North Carolina, and had failed. I don't know why it failed or anything, or where anybody's investigated that. But my whole purpose of being here tonight, I'm not one way or another on what you're doing. What I'm trying to suggest is revenue needs to go to the short-term rental, but all expenses should go to them as well.
Thank you. I do want to point out that according to this ordinance, they will be required to charge an occupancy tax, which Obviously, normal homeowners don't charge an occupancy tax, so we will recoup some revenue that way. I can't say that it would be revenue neutral, but they would be required to pay an occupancy tax. But I think you bring up a really good point. You mentioned that we don't really know where the 600 STRs are. And that's because there is no vehicle right now. We don't have an ordinance. There's no way to regulate or follow them, follow them. That is why we are working on this ordinance. Many people have said we're doing this ordinance to allow short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are here already, so this is just a way of us permitting them and making them accountable to the city and to give the neighborhoods greater say in what's going on.
But
So-
also it protects the people renting
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
So there's some protection there.
Thank you, and do you still have time?
Okay, just one quick thing. There's going to be some analytics that need to be done with this, and I've talked with Mike Kirkman. He's been great. Isabel in your office has been great, the budget office. I'm kind of an analytical guy, as you might have caught on to. If I can be of any help, Mike knows how to reach out to me, so does Isabel. If I can be of any help in trying to set this out and set it in motion so it is fair to the taxpayers that don't have one and also fair to the taxpayers that do have one.
Thank you.
you.
Mr. Little?
Good evening. My name is Randy Little. I live at 639 Scott Avenue in Greensboro, and I live in Lindley Park. And I'm here to issue a statement from the Lindley Park Neighborhood Association. And part of this does reflect the desire to have separation between the houses, which you've addressed. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll try to eliminate that from the statement so we don't have too much overlap. So good evening. My name is Randy Little. I'm here this evening representing the Lindley Park Neighborhood Association Executive Committee, which has been active in discussions about the impact of short-term rentals on our community and on Greensboro as a whole. We do appreciate the time and energy that residents, staff, Mayor Vaughn, and other members of City Council have given to this important conversation. Appreciate it. Residents of Lindley Park have shared concerns about occupancy, density, and enforcement, and we'd like to briefly address those concerns at this time. Properties in established neighborhoods that are owned and operated, whether by individuals or corporations, solely for the purpose of short-term rental, must be considered commercial enterprises and should be regulated as such. By definition, a neighborhood is primarily meant to be a place where people live, not where business is conducted. Regulations are not effective without proper enforcement. Owners and operators of short-term rentals should be clear on the consequences of not complying with the requirements of the ordinance. For that to happen, the ordinance must clearly state that violations shall result in revoking of permits and assessment of meaningful fines. We believe Greensboro's neighborhoods are worth protecting, and that thoughtful consideration of these points will benefit both residential and commercial property owners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, that's all I have to say. Any questions? Thank you.
Dottie Erickson, followed by Kathy Latham, followed by Joy Watson.
Good evening. My name is Dottie Erickson at address 905 Windover Avenue.
Ma'am. Thank you.
My name is Dottie Erickson. I live at 905 Windover Avenue, 27408. Short-term rentals are not contemporary. Boarding houses have been around for centuries, dating back to biblical times. Inns and lodges providing temporary accommodations for travelers, immigrants. Those things were common in Greece, Rome, and other societies. Short-term rentals are not new. They are not contemporary. Airbnb is a new rental marketing platform. As elected officials and public servants, you have an obligation to serve the interests of citizens and the community as a whole. However, conflicts of interest can arise that undermine this obligation and the trust in our government. Even the appearance of a conflict can be damaging, as you well know. As public servants, your decisions and policies in office should not provide private benefit to you, your family members, or your business interests. If you stand to gain financially or otherwise from hotels or traditional residential rentals, you have a conflict and should recuse yourself immediately. Each of you took an oath to uphold certain principles in office. Among the most sacred are impartiality, fairness, and avoiding even the appearance of corruption. I urge you to honor that oath and always put service over self-interest. I am retired and on a limited income. My short-term rental, and it does happen to be an Airbnb, is what helps keep me off the welfare rolls. And there's a lot of older people like myself that need extra income. Please consider that others that also use lodging rentals for needed income. Also, we do pay taxes. We pay extra taxes just like the hotels do. When I have a guest, I pay an extra tax for that, as well as the income tax. So I'm not trying to use that and the facilities for the fire department and all of those public services for free. I thank you very much for your time tonight, and I do appreciate the important work that you do. I wouldn't want your job. Avoid conflicts of interest at all costs, and when in doubt, recuse yourself. Your integrity and reputation depend on it. Thank you.
Okay? Yes. Hi, I'm Kathy Latham. I live at 14 Josephine Circle, right next door to an Airbnb. I share a wall in a townhome community with an Airbnb. Back in the day, we used to have a slogan, human needs before profits. Our current culture has turned that idea on its head, and now it's profits before human needs, no matter what. To me, that's clearly what this new ordinance is about. I appreciate all the hard work that you've done on this, but it's still really far away from what would work for those of us who live next door to an Airbnb. Airbnbs are taking away affordable housing all over the world at a time when lack of affordable housing is at such a critical stage. Increasingly, climate and war refugees will be flooding into more and more cities and towns across the country searching for housing. We have people who own 10 homes and rent them out for profit, resulting in more and more people who cannot find just one little home, and people making money off of someone else's misery. Lack of affordable housing will only get worse, expanding the ranks of the homeless. Seniors, low-income, and young, low-wage workers are finding it increasingly difficult to find affordable housing. Increasingly, public workers and service industry workers cannot afford to live in cities where they work. Housing security is linked to every aspect of social and economic well-being. Allowing 1,000-plus Airbnbs in Greensboro alone takes away existing housing and practically obliterates the affordable housing pool. Instead of helping these units remain available for Greensboro residents and workers, the city is spending millions to build 24 affordable housing units, and many more millions of our tax money is going to support the tourist industry, which does not benefit residents. This plan to allow people to turn their rental units into mini hotels is at best short-sighted. At worst, it's irresponsible. Over and over, I hear council members and others pay lip service to creating a balance between commercial interests and the city's residents who pay taxes. Join in community improvement projects and make our communities vibrant and strong. Where is the balance that you all keep talking about? The process was not balanced from the very beginning and dishonest to pretend otherwise. Only 2 community members were chosen to be part of a working group of 14 members, almost all of whom represent realtors and other commercial interests. One city representative actually reminded us at the Planning and Zoning Department meeting or hearing that we have to remember that corporations are people too. Commercial activity is about selling goods or services for profit. The more profit these mini hotels make, the better for them, and maybe for other commercial interests, but not for the residents of Greensboro. I support sending this ordinance back for negotiations and deliberation with actual neighborhood representatives.
Thank you. Joy Watson, followed by Joyce Uri, followed by Luther Falls Jr.
Hello, my name is Joy Watson, and I live at 909 West Wendover Avenue. My family purchased blighted homes in the Idlewood neighborhood because they were outside of the HOA, which we previously owned in, that was limiting the length of stay we could offer to our guests. We put significant effort into improving our homes and have made them into a job site for teaching job and life skills to high school students in the occupational course of study in Guilford County schools. We have increased the value of these homes and the overall value of the entire neighborhood. The City Council had no interest in enforcing the minimum housing standards when those homes were traditional rentals, with people using drugs living in the crawl space of one and the tub rotting through the floor of the other. I know the residents who were previously renting these homes, and I know that they had called the city and filed complaints. I know that the city did not enforce the minimum housing standards of these traditional rentals. If the goal is preventing blight and problem neighbors, shouldn't we have standards applying equally no matter how long the rental is? Separate restrictions just on short-term rentals, like the proposed rules, undercut treating everyone fairly and equally. It has been brought to my attention that some of our city council members are also housing providers. To keep this impartial, members invested in hotels or receiving any income from any length of stay residential rentals, please recuse themselves due to the conflict of interest. Like you, I want rules where everyone, all residents, guests, and housing providers for all lengths of stays are treated fairly, and corporate hotels are not shown preferential treatment because they are campaign contributors and providing public servant paychecks. Thank you for your time.
I just want to say, is there anyone in City Council who owns a rental property that would be impacted?
No.
I own a home that I rent to my grandson. You said rental property, but that's it.
No.
No, I don't. I do.
I just wanted to clarify that. I know it's come up twice. I just wanted to set the record straight.
I understood that. I just wanted to make it clear to the citizens that the conflicts rules that council lives under would not apply to this situation in that way. This is a general legislation that would cover the entire city. Some people benefit, some people lose, but it doesn't amount to a direct financial benefit to any council person. And therefore, under the positive vote rules requirements that the legislature has passed, you have an obligation to vote.
Regardless, I just wanted to set that record straight. Thank you.
To your point, Madam Mayor, basically, I get what you're saying, Chuck, but also the perception that's been thrown out there for the first two speakers or whatever doesn't exist. So perception or reality, it doesn't exist.
Luther?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Greensboro City Council. My name is Luther Falls Jr., reside at 1603 Lansdowne Avenue, and I'm also the Secretary and the Marketing Director for the Botchable Network, Inc. I had a recent experience with a bed and breakfast in Raleigh, and these are specialized housing units for specific purposes, and I'm happy to see that you are taking careful deliberation on how these units should be regulated, because they're providing a valuable need for the community. We had a very important event going on. A lot of people came in from all over the country for the event that we were attending, and they rented a house, very nice, plenty of parking and everything. So I think it's very, very important to have these available for specific needs and for the proper requirements that you're considering now carefully for these to be handled, so people can address whatever they might need to address. And I'm quite sure that you will take careful and serious deliberation to reach the appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. And you are, I'm sorry, that was Joyce,
I'm
right?
Joyce Uri.
Joyce.
Joyce Uri.
So after Joyce, Cheryl Pratt, followed by Corliss McGinty. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Joyce Uri. I live at 805 Howard Street. And I want to first just thank you for rescheduling this meeting from the other week, which allows us all a little bit better exchange. I know that was going to be a horrifically long meeting for you all especially. While I have some concern about homestay rentals, it's notably less because there's likely to be more accountability from an owner who lives in the home. The majority of my concern is about whole house rentals. I realize that the pressure and possibly the proposed bill in the General Assembly may be guiding how Greensboro's ordinance has been written and seems to make reasonable regulation more difficult. But for this reason, it's imperative that our ordinance be very tightly defined in every way that can be permitted, from fines and enforcement, but especially for managing growth. And I'll skip over the part about the separation request since you've already taken care of that. Thank you very much. But I did note in all of the information provided by the Planning Department that the comparison sheet showed that none of the cities that were used in the comparison did have a separation requirement. A couple of them did have other ways to regulate the density of short-term rentals. So with Asheville and Chapel Hill, they have them in resort or commercial districts. And there was some note that this was problematic in Greensboro, and I found this a bit confusing without having further information, but wondered if that might be something else that could be included in a way to just manage the number or the density that's possibly going to develop here. Chapel Hill, I also noted that they do allow them in residential areas, but only if the owner lives there for more than half of the year. And this honestly seems to address a lot of concerns that people have. It keeps the homeowner more accountable with their neighbors in their neighborhood. It keeps the rental from purely being a commercial venture. And then it indirectly addresses the concern that's been expressed by several people about corporate ownership, since you can really only live in one home more than 50% of the time. So for all of these reasons, the number of short-term rentals in these cities is likely to be notably less than it would be in a city that doesn't have these types of regulations. So my main ask was that you find specific ways to manage the number of short-term rentals. And again, I appreciate the 750-foot separation that you've already voted on. And thank you for any other consideration you can give to this.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Pratt. I live at 910 Magnolia Street. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The short-term rental working group represented homeowners from several diverse Greensboro neighborhoods. We want to thank Mayor Vaughn and other city council members who were willing to meet with us over the last several months to discuss options, edits, or just what could be done to tighten this ordinance up a little bit. I do have to say that a non-owner occupied short-term rental whose function is to serve a revolving number of guests on a permanent basis does not qualify as a dwelling unit. It is a transient accommodation, and to allow transient accommodations in residential neighborhoods is to change the use without residents' knowledge or consent. It's a de facto rezoning. We know this ordinance is not going to address that, but we're looking forward to seeing how this all plays out within the next several months, and how well this ordinance works as far as protecting neighborhoods. If not, it can certainly be addressed with a ballot initiative. But we do really appreciate the contact information being required inside of short-term rentals to be given, inside the buildings to whoever's renting them. We would also like that information to be available upon request by adjacent property owners in case there is continuing problems. The two adults per bedroom, we do also appreciate you tightening up what the definition of a bedroom is, but that we do realize that sleeper sofas and living rooms can be used by minors and actually shouldn't be used by anybody else but minors. Unless you like sleeper sofas. Liability insurance, parking one car for bedroom, the 1,000-foot separation that we were asking for, the 750 compromise, We're happy with that. And the multi-unit living use, no more than 25%, or one dwelling unit, whichever is greater. And our last concern was enforcement and the third-party firm that the city plans to hire to monitor the web platforms for short-term rentals. Is this funded? Will this actually happen? We do hope that this part of the puzzle actually happens, because otherwise enforcement falls back on the neighbors and the neighborhoods. And thank you very much for all your hard work on this.
Thank you. Corliss McGinty, followed by Shakia Burnett and Carolyn Smith.
I'm Corliss McGinty, and I live on Briarcliff Road in Latham Park. And I have a different perspective for you. I started renting my guest room about 8 or 9 years ago on Airbnb, and I really liked hosting. It's just, well, it's one of my spiritual gifts. I love it, and I've been a super host ever since. Then one of my first clients was a young man who's a physical therapist working up in Eden. His contract was for 3 months. All healthcare contracts are for 3 months. That's my niche. I'm less than a mile from Cone Hospital. I have a bicycle for them to ride through the park, and that seems to be who I attract. I also have attracted people who had to get out of their house for several months because of mold. I've had to rent it out for people moving to the area that don't have their apartment or house ready yet. So there are a lot of people that have more than 1 month needs. And that 30-day one, I went, what? I believe in all the other stuff going on. I don't want corporations buying out. I want our neighborhoods to stay the same. I introduce my guests to my neighbors, and we interact. They can bring their animals and take them on a walk. So it's been a very good deal, but I want you to really think about a 30-day max. Why? Why do we need a max? Do I need to do a contract every month? To me, that would be cheating. But, we have a lot of traveling healthcare people. I actually have a traveling anesthesiologist technician in what used to be my she cave, but I put a bathroom in it. During COVID, that was $35,000. So I've invested heavily in this. And his contract has been renewed 3 times because they need him. So when he's gone, it'll be a year. So I'm kind of getting fuzzy about, is he a roommate? What's going on? P.S. Now I have a she shed.
I know we're trying our best not to comment on every speaker, but I wanted just to let you know that this does not prohibit rentals longer than 30 days. They're just not considered a short-term rental. They would be considered a regular rental. So I think our next 2 speakers are on Zoom. Shakia Burnett. They're not on. Is Carolyn Smith on? No? Okay. Kara Douglas, followed by Lynn Hasler, followed by Michael Pendergraph. Either, just introduce yourself.
I'm second from what you said.
Oh, okay. However you want to do it.
I thought there were 2 more people coming. Hello. Good evening, City Council. My name is Kara Douglas, and I'm a homeowner of 21 years here in Greensboro, and I live in the 27406 district. Recently, I turned my house over into an Airbnb because I changed my career to a flight attendant, so I'm Holly over there. And I have such a lovely home that my neighbor, Miss Angel, over there suggested. She's also an Airbnb person. She suggested that I turn my home over so that people can come and stay in my home when I'm not there. And it also helps me to supplement my income and to help pay for my daughter, who's a medical student. So it helps a lot. And I just want to say that my guests are coming because they don't want a hotel. They want something away from home. In lieu of COVID, they just want to be to themselves. Though I do let them know about my neighbors, and like the other lady, I introduced them to my neighbors. My neighbors know that someone is staying in my home because they know I'm hardly ever there, so they're watching my house anyway. They don't have parties. They follow the rules, and they really enjoy staying with me. I had one person from Dallas who said that my house was the cutest house in the neighborhood. Loved the security system since she was staying there by herself. It was very clean and comfortable, and she would highly recommend it. Another person said Kara's home felt just like home in a nice development. Just as pictured, she met every request I had and always communicated. And there was some talk about communication. We do communicate. They have my phone number. They can text me, or mostly they have to text me because if I'm flying, I can't get to them right away. But I also have a co-host that assists me when I am flying. And I'm just hearing about this because I'm in and out a lot, and my neighbor told me, you got to come to this thing today, so that's why I'm here, because I'm just new at this, and it is tremendously helping me out with the things that I need to supplement my income, and I would like for it to stay as it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for your time and your attention to such an important situation. My name is Dr. Lynn Hessler. I live in Fisher Park. I recently moved here because I wanted a neighborhood. I'm on the Fisher Park board. I'm in charge of social events. I care about families. I care about children. I care that our park is cared for by our neighbors. We have Saturday cleanup time, and neighbors can come together, spearheaded by one of our board members. With my social event, I want everyone to know each other, to meet each other, so that when you're walking down the street, you can say, hi, Tom. Hey, how's your child? You know, how's it going? Oh, I heard your mother was in the hospital. What can I do to help you? And so I'm living in a house. Who's going to be next to me? An Airbnb bought by property investors who don't live in the neighborhood, who doesn't care. They're just receiving their funds from renting it out, and I have cars coming and going and people coming and going. Where's my fabric? Where's my security? Where's my safety? How come I plead to you to consider, as you create this ordinance, to consider enforcement, to consider what kind of neighborhood are we going to create here in our beautiful city of Greensboro. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you. And so I really implore you to think about the context. You're thinking that neighborhood is a place that a short-term housing can come to. It changes the chemistry. It's not a neighborhood. You think that it's going to continue to be a neighborhood? It's not. It's going to change the chemistry. It's going to become a businesshood. You're going to lose your neighbors. You're going to lose that feeling of neighborhood. Thank you. Thank you.
After Mr. Pendergraph, Chris D., John Enos.
So my name's Michael Pendergraft. I live at 106 Kensington Road, and this is not the first time I've spoken to this ordinance. Is that better?
We hope so.
I normally project well. I will be happy to do it without the microphone if you want me to. I see I'm going to count myself as having an extra 15 seconds because of this glitch. Nothing in this ordinance, well, that's not the way to start. The way to start is with the short-term rentals. The U says the intent of these standards is to ensure the level of activity related to short-term rentals does not change the character of property for residential or create significant negative impacts on adjacent residential uses. What are you going to do if it does? There's no remedy for anybody if it creates a burden on you if there are parties next to you. There's no remedy. Secondly, there are a number of things that the ordinance, in my opinion, fouls up, such as in number 2, short-term rentals are required to have the permit displayed on the associated property, and on any advertisements posted relating to the changes must be, and any changes must be made to that permit within 30 days of change in owner or operator. This permit may be denied or revoked by the planning department based on either the conviction of the owner of a criminal offense on the short-term premises or having 2 or more verified violations of the city ordinances. They're not required to do anything. You can get away with anything if you've got a buddy on the staff. And that also conflicts with what's in number 7 of this ordinance, which is that failure to follow the minimum housing code and other fire codes and whatnot will constitute grounds for revocation of the zoning permit. So is which controls, the may or the shall? I would argue that the shall does. Gatherings gatherings that are publicly announced or promoted through any means and involve more than 2 times the number of persons renting. Renting is not defined. Is that your kid? Is that your 19-year-old son-in-law who's staying down the hall from you? If he's not a renter tends to be somebody that has what you'd call skin in the game. This is not defined. There are other issues with this ordinance as well, such as what does it mean all short-term rentals must come into compliance with the standards within 6 months? That's in this ordinance in 2 places. Wow, that doesn't make sense. So, next, all
Mr.
ordinances...
Pendergraph, I think we gave you the extra 10 seconds back.
I'm going to say one more thing. All ordinances in conflict with the provisions of this ordinance are repealed to the extent of such conflict.
Thank you.
Does that include special use permits that have been granted? Are they revoked as well for those people that complied with the law? Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is John Enos. I live at 681 Percy Street in the Dunleith neighborhood. Appreciate the modifications you made at the beginning of the meeting. I think that does address some concerns. But 2 points that I would like to make tonight is that first, I strongly believe that short-term rentals should be occupied by their owners. Owners that occupy that property are a vital part of any neighborhood, and they are directly invested in the character of that neighborhood. By having the owner on premise of a short-term rental, any minor or major problems can be addressed immediately and not left to the police or some after-the-fact, undefined, slow-moving zoning enforcement bureaucracy. Owners that do not live in Greensboro or even in the county do not have a strong attachment to the neighborhoods that they operate in. In effect, they are running a hotel business, and that should not be allowed in a residentially zoned area. Second, at the Zoning Commission hearing on this matter, many of your constituents voiced a great many negative points about the proposed ordinances. What you did earlier tonight and a few of the other changes have made the proposal more palatable, I believe, but it's still not addressing some of the very most major concerns. The people that vote in Greensboro made their views clear. I do not think it is appropriate for those voices to be outweighed by investors that do not live within the limits of Greensboro. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris D., followed by James Haddon, followed by Dassey Skinlon.
Good evening, Council. My main concern is the amendment that was made earlier
If
today.
you would give us your name for the record.
I'm sorry. I'm Christopher D. I live in at 5411 Forest Oaks Drive in Forest Oaks subdivision. I'm sorry. My main concern is about the 750-foot requirement. As we've heard this evening, several people kind of, in some occasions, stumbled upon the opportunity of short-term rental. Perhaps I believe one person said, she's retired and is using it as supplemental income, and I believe the other one said she kind of had like a change in occupation or what have you. My concern is I'm not sure how, is it a first come, first served with the permit, and then once that happens, let's say there's a life change, perhaps a divorce or a family member passes, and now I can't get a permit because the neighbor 4 doors down just happened to be in a position, or they were there, or maybe someone they didn't even hear about that, or what have you. Perhaps some consideration can be made that maybe there's some kind of provisional permit or something like that, where okay, there's somebody that's within 750 feet, maybe maybe they don't have complete the entire number of days or something along those lines. But I'm not quite sure how this is going to be enforced. Is it an annual thing? Once I have a permit, do I have it for the next 10 years? And regardless if I use it as a short-term rental, who cares about anybody else who wants to do it? That's within my 750 feet. I really think that while I do kind of understand the need to address short-term rentals, I think kind of putting a somewhat almost like a mini monopoly not a mini monopoly in terms of controlling the entire area, but it's monopoly if I can't do it because I just happen to have my house next door to someone else and now they're preventing me from using my house as a STR. So I really hope the council really kind of addresses that restriction that was voted on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm James Haddon. I live at 404 West Bessemer Avenue, Fisher Park. I was really pleased to see the actions that you took at the first of the meeting. I think those address a lot of the concerns that I had. I do have a follow-up on the comments that he made about 750 feet and what's going on. I mean, we know there's 600 short-term more or less here. What do we do if what happens if there are 3 in a row down the street from one another? I mean, how are you going to handle that? I mean, I think there needs to be some thought put into that because there ought to be some lessening of density if that takes place. I do have a concern about your parking thing. I live in a small, what do you say? I live on a one-way street. A lot of the houses are built in the early 20s, and some of them don't have driveways. And they're smaller houses, but I think we need to have something to address the parking, that you have parking available per house. And I understand that the city street parking is probably, legitimate, but you're disrupting the neighborhoods if you don't have something there that's available for and apart. And, at least consider, how do we address that? I mean, if, somebody comes in and parks 3 cars because they got a 3-bedroom house on the thing, there's people that have been, it's pretty much totally utilized anyway. How are we going to move with that? The other thing that I'd say is, and maybe it's in the current document, but I think you need to have something to address safety of residents in terms of carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors in each one of the bedrooms that are being serviced. I mean, that's just a safety issue, and maybe you ask for liability insurance, but I think that needs to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Dossie, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, followed by Todd Schwartz, followed by Lynn Brandon.
I know my name's tough. It's Dossie Sklan. That's all right. It was worse before I got married and took a shorter name. I'm not a good public speaker. I tried to take some notes. I will say a couple of things. One, I am the owner of a tourist home, which is not affected by this, but the only way that I'm a very successful tourist home, and my neighbors love me, and we can go on and on. But the only way to expand for me will be to buy another property, and I would like it to be near me, to have an Airbnb that is close enough that I can clean it, see it, all of those things. So I don't know how that would work with the distance, if you're going to count the tourist home against it or not. So that's the one thing, because I'm soon to do that within the next 2 years. I'm watching. So I like that you're working on making some rules. I think that is important, and I think there are certainly some in town that are not so good. But in general, there are so many that are so wonderful that you don't even know they're there. Okay? And Airbnb is also a platform that has a lot of boutique hotels on it. Tourist homes, we all get to use it because it's a great advertising source, because people know it. So when you're counting those units, they may not be as many as you think. Plus, when you're counting a unit, if you have 3 separate rooms available, they count as 3 units. So exactly how many we have will be interesting to find out, and how that goes. One of the things that was added since the last meeting that I realized was the 2 adults per bedroom. And in general, that's good, but I have a problem with the fact that it's not taking any concern as to how big is the bedroom. How many beds does it have in it? If you go to a standard hotel room that has 2 queen beds, you may have 4 adults. So I would like to give the example of a friend of mine whose child with 2 other 20-year-old college student was coming back from Princeton and going to Atlanta. They stayed overnight in Greensboro. 3 people. They would not have been allowed to be in one room under this ordinance, even though it had 2 queen beds. And they're not old enough to get a hotel room in Greensboro, where you have to be 21, the 20-year-old college students, and they need one night so that they don't have to sleep at the campground or sleep in their car. So I think it needs to have something about how big is the room, or how many beds, or if you need a certain amount of floor space of the bed. But just, or if you want to have an open floor plan. I mean, I think that's cutting a funny thing. And one other thing, to the man who was worried about the taxes, paying for things, anybody who has a listing on Airbnb, I don't know about Verbo, even if there's a tourist home, and under the tourist home, I don't have to pay occupancy tax, but anybody who rents my room through Airbnb does. So Airbnb, they're taking occupancy tax, they're taking sales tax, I'm paying my property taxes, I'm paying income tax. So we're paying for services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Lynn Brandon. I thank you for letting me have a few minutes to speak. I want to say I don't know everything that's in the ordinance, but what I've heard tonight is good. I'm really thankful for what I'm hearing. So I'm not opposed to an Airbnb. I'm opposed to when they're not regulated, or when it encroaches, which I'm hearing from everyone on their lives. I know there's been other hearings, so I don't know what's been said about townhomes. What I feel is a little unique about my situation is I am in a townhome. We do have a homeowners association, and they have told me that they cannot do anything. I share a wall with an Airbnb beside me, and for 4 years it's made my life virtually miserable. So I just am asking for help. I don't want to encroach on anyone else's life. I love Greensboro. I'm a peaceful person. I just want peace and to enjoy my neighborhood. What is odd to me about this situation is, well, what I would like to know and get help with, no one knows how to contact the owner, but secondly, to me, what I think is strange, and I don't really know why it's allowed, it is a sublet. So we don't know where the owner is. I don't believe she lives in Greensboro. She rents to 2 college kids that no one has seen in probably 2 years. So all of us are shaking our heads. Why is that allowed? and there seems to be no enforcement of the rules. And I know you've heard them all, so I don't want to waste anyone's time, but it's the parking spaces. I mean, you name it, I've encountered. They take up multiple spaces. I think we do have a noise ordinance. It's basically a party pad. The demographic there is a lot of young people. I've seen very legitimate families, and I would have no problem with peaceful, families visiting. But I do have a problem with people that pull in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I have to get up and work the next day, and they sit in their cars at all hours of the night. I've questioned really what is going on beside me. I'm trying to make sure I hit everything. So I'm just basically asking for help. I've been told, again, by my HOA that they can't do anything, and it's frustrating. So I'd appreciate anything. I mean, I think the owner, there needs to just be some accountability. And what I'm hearing or feel like I'm being told, I'm a homeowner, but I feel like their rights are superseding the neighborhood. And I just want to keep it a nice neighborhood. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Schwartz, followed by Carrie Foley, followed by J.T. Job.
Hello, my name's Todd Schwartz, and I live at 108 Fisher Park Circle. I guess I've been to the zoning meeting now, the city council meeting, and the reassigned city council meeting. I just felt like I needed to voice my opinion to the matter. So I'm here to speak in opposition to the changes being proposed, and feel that if anything, we just need to enforce the current rules and even maybe make them a bit tougher to limit the short-term rentals by what I would think would be a fair change was to non-owner occupants in our residential neighborhoods, just as other communities across the state have done. The new proposals seem to soften the rules a little bit and allow freedom to ignore what I think are zoning rules that are the foundation of protecting the integrity of our neighborhoods. I'm a real estate investor. I've been doing it for about 40 years. I mainly operate commercial real estate. To me, it's almost unbelievable that in such a short period of time, the city has allowed these investors to come in to our neighborhood and create what I consider mini hotels without any checks and balances. For me, almost daily, I have to deal with oversight in my leasing activities to maintain compliance with local zoning ordinances. And they're there to protect the other neighbors. Zoning rules are not meant to. The zoning rules are meant to protect our investments as individual homeowners and to help maintain the individualized communities that formed the neighborhoods subject to the zoning compliance. Again, I don't think I'm opposed to owner-occupied short-term rentals. It seems to be if the owner's there, they can manage the situation much better. But I do respectfully ask the council members to vote against these changes and challenge this board to find ways to remove these businesses from our neighborhoods. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and esteemed councilpersons, I am Carrie Foley. Thank you so much for your attention tonight. With the exception of the new 750-foot distance, which I don't agree with, I am here in support of the STR ordinance, as it will secure a viable means for me to care for my family as an Airbnb owner during a season when many of the normal streams of income are not available to me. Let me tell you a little bit about one of Greensboro's finest citizens. Evan is an exceedingly joyful and pure-hearted 24-year-old Grimsley High School graduate. He has a rare genetic condition that causes cerebral palsy, nonverbal autism, and cognitive impairment. He cannot work and he cannot live without a full-time, one-on-one caregiver. But in the fall of 2021, Evan found himself without enough caregivers. Evan is my son, so I did what any of you as parents would do, and I left my stable career in finance in order to ensure Evan's safety. But then there was an issue of income. To make a passive income, I turned to becoming an Airbnb owner and host, which literally saved Evan's life. I am so relieved that I found this small business model that has the power to protect one of Greensboro's most vulnerable citizens. I urge you, council members, to regulate STRs because the proposed ordinance will be like a wall around an abundant garden. It will protect our citizens and allow people like myself to harvest a living wage. Don't leave that garden gate open to big businesses and interests that have nothing to do with Greensboro's needs. Not long ago, it was common for widows to let out rooms so that they could make ends meet, and this ordinance makes a space for a time-tested cottage industry to come back to life. According to the National STR publications, Greensboro is now in the top 5 of the most attractive markets for investors to buy. And with that recent public propping up of Greensboro, well-deserved, if we don't act quickly, our local economy is going to suffer. I support the STR ordinance because it, number one, protects my son, Evan, one of Greensboro's most vulnerable citizens. Number two, it lets me make a living so that I can support him and my other 3 children. It also allows visitors to buy local, creating personal connections on Main Street as opposed to Wall Street. And it keeps STR money inside the local economy by keeping non-resident investors out. Please, as my counsel, I plead with you to make a place for local STR entrepreneurs to thrive and to take care of their families. Regulate us so that we know that there is a future where we can provide for our families, for our communities, and for our guests, and to show off the Gate City as a friendly city with arms ever open to travelers looking for a place to lay their heads.
Thank you. J.T. Job, followed by Ann Stringfield, followed by Ryan Richmond.
Hi, good evening, City Council. Thank you for having this special session. My name is J.T. Job. I live at 409 Victoria Street. I'm here to urge you to pass the most strict ordinance you can regarding STRs. So therefore, I am in favor of the 750-foot accommodation you've made. But to be honest, I hate to be a gadfly to y'all, but I'm going to keep fighting the issue even with that. I don't believe short-term rentals belong in a residential neighborhood. I don't think it's rocket science. Resident is in residential. If I go somewhere and stay in a hotel, I'm not a resident. If I want a more homey feel, which I understand, and I rent an Airbnb, I'm still not a resident. Residential neighborhoods are for residents. And so I want the strictest possible regulations on short-term rentals. I know I'm not going to get everything I want tonight, but I'm young, despite my lack of hair, and I will continue fighting for this. And the reason why is because this is very personal to me. I have a young daughter, and right next door to our property is a dilapidated, unlived-in house. It's going to need a lot of work when it does come on the market. And I'm worried that a property investor with all cash will beat out anybody looking to live in it as their true home. And I'm worried there's going to be a revolving door of guests next door to me. This home that my wife and I bought is the biggest investment we've ever made in our life, probably the biggest investment we will ever make in our lives. I've got a young family, and even if I don't like my neighbors, I know who they are. I know what to expect. An Airbnb is a revolving door of people, and you know what? There's probably some creeps in there. And I don't want that next to my family, which is why, I urge you to pass whatever you can with the strictest regulations, but I'm honestly going to not stop bugging you about this because I don't think there's any place for short-term rentals in a residential neighborhood. Just because everyone else does it, just because it's become a thing in the past few years, doesn't mean it's something we need to accept. I thank you for your time and attention on this. I know this is a difficult situation. It's a balancing act. I feel for the Airbnb owners. But at the same time, it's not like if they can no longer rent their house as an Airbnb, they've lost their entire investment. It could be a long-term rental. They could sell it. It's not the end of the world. And so I just urge you to be as strict as you can. I don't believe these things belong in residential neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
cut you off before you start.
I'm Ann Stringfield of 1005 North Eugene Street, and I do request stronger controls than you've proposed tonight, although we have made improvements. I enjoy staying in B&Bs myself. Personally, I choose to stay in bed and breakfasts where the owners live on site, and a lovely breakfast is always prepared for me. But I support stronger regulations for short-term rentals, both for the safety and enjoyment of visitors, and now even more so for the safety and enjoyment of neighboring homeowners who did not choose for a revolving door commercial entity to operate next door to perhaps our largest single investment, our homes. Neighbors deserve to know someone's on call anytime for significant concerns and assurance that a commercial enterprise operating next door is commercially insured, and I believe you are beginning to address that in the ordinance we've briefly read. But neighbors in older historic district neighborhoods such as mine especially need an ordinance that requires greater distance in short-term rental properties. Most of our older historic district homes are 10 to 15 feet apart from one another. 10 to 15 feet apart from one another. Even a 1,000-foot distance would reasonably allow a short-term rental every 2 blocks. A shorter distance, which you're proposing tonight, would allow a short-term rental about every 8 homes, and that's too close, especially when that commercial rental business would be 10 feet from each of our homes. 10 feet from each of our homes. Thank you for considering greater distancing requirements for short-term rentals, especially in our older historic district neighborhoods where courtesy is a treasured commodity. Thank you.
Is Ryan Richmond here? The next speaker is Michael, no last name, Nathan Bell.
Hi, my name is Michael Fugo Rizzo. I live at 301 Fisher Park Circle. I might arguably be the person who spurred this entire ordinance back in 2019 when our house was advertised on Airbnb, and I think all of these discussions started. We since have been granted a special use permit and run the Price House as a bed and breakfast. But I did want to show up first to answer questions. I don't know if I'm in support of this ordinance. I think you have to do something. So, it's somewhere to start. If there are any questions, 2 notes that I made for people: we do pay 6% tax, actually. We pay 3% to the city and 3% to the county on top of sales tax. So that gets split. We pay it downtown every month. And the liability insurance was interesting to me. I think that's something you might want to actually consider. I have to carry a large policy for liability specifically. So I don't know if I don't know if you can enforce that from zoning, but that might be something to have to prove you have when you get your permit.
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah. And I would maybe consider doing a working group with the neighborhoods, try to pull 1 or 2 people out of every neighborhood for the next year or 2 and see how it goes and get their feedback, because a lot of people have a lot of good opinions of how to do this or thoughts on ways to change it, and maybe some of that can be incorporated once you get this initial round in place. But
thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, City Council. My name is Nathan Bell, and my granddad worked right here, Guilford County facilities for his whole life in Jamestown. I'm a builder, a handyman, and a property owner here in Greensboro, right near the Coliseum. And I've put a lot of my own time and energy and money into making the home that I was living in, that's now Airbnb, something nice, and revamping that community and that street, and it's slowly coming up and coming together. And I think what I'm hearing up here is a lot of different perspectives from different neighborhoods. And, oh, in this neighborhood, it doesn't work too good. In this neighborhood, you know, we want to keep our neighbors just our neighbors. And so maybe something along the lines where that neighborhood can kind of come together and say what they want would be appropriate. But thank you for taking all of our opinions. It's a tough decision you have to make. And, you know, I know we have a real need for affordable housing in North Carolina. But at the same time, most of that is not getting X'd away by Airbnb. It's, you know, big, large corporate greed. So I don't think there's a lot of infighting that needs to happen. And yeah, I think it's a really good way to keep the money in the economy. I mean, nobody's going to take care of my house for me. And for people who are out of state, I have clients that I work for that are like, this isn't working out so good. I got to pay a loan guy. I got to pay this. I got to pay that. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe it doesn't work out so good for you. But I put in a lot of energy and time into my own things. And that's really the only way to make it. So, you know, capitalism has a way of shedding out what's not working. And hopefully, if you don't have a parking spot for your people, if I live next to you, me and you are going to have words. You're going to get a bad review. Me and your Airbnb guests are going to have words, and we're going to just get you on down up out of their way. And so I would just try to keep in mind that America is founded on young entrepreneurial people like us who are trying to make this city better. And this city needs all of the historic funding and all of the tourism and all of the dollars that we can get to come into this city. We're not Asheville. We're not Chapel Hill. We're not Wilmington. You know, we're Greensboro, North Carolina. People come down 85 on their way to Charlotte, stop over, maybe have a drink, you know, go see what are downtown, go see our historic events. But we need that. We need that to be open, and we're trying to keep that big Coliseum running and keep all of our tourism here running. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The final two speakers I have are Selden Morris and Megan Callahan. If our speakers would come to the window side of the room. If you signed up for this item and I haven't called your name, please check with the courier and then go to the window side of the room.
Hi, good evening, Council. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our voices in the community. I live at 4809 Edinburgh Road in Forest Oaks community. I am an immigrant from Trinidad and Tobago and a single dad, and I take care of my parents, and I'm the single and sole breadwinner of my family. With the income that I make with my current job, I cannot support these people that depend on me. Airbnb has facilitated a way for me to take care of my family, and I think that it's a very important thing for our residents to have, and I think that it's a good thing that enriches our community. I have hosted many guests who were nurses during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's like 90% of my guests. They're usually very quiet, very peaceful people who come into the community, and they are part of my community. They meet with my neighbors, they go to church, they shop, and I think that Airbnb does nothing but enrich spaces and bring more tourism and we pay taxes, we pay sales taxes, and they also have liability insurance. Airbnb has, by default, $1 million liability insurance. So I heard that being mentioned, but by default, Airbnb has $1 million liability insurance. So I just wanted my voice to be heard today, and I think that is a positive thing for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Megan Callahan.
Good evening, Megan Callahan, resident of Fisher Park, lifelong born and raised Moses Cone resident. You all probably have a copy of your ordinance in front of you, and I just want to refer to a couple words. Obviously, you can probably figure out who the lawyers are that come up, but I am an attorney. And I'm going to just kind of point out, number one, I do agree with a couple individuals who said residential is residential and commercial STRs should not be in residential neighborhoods because it does change it. However, I understand this city council is going to rule on something, create an ordinance, and put it in place. Distance is critical to preserve residential. The reason I say that is I have a short-term rental across from me. Everyone in this room has different perspectives, whether it be their house, their aunt's house, their circumstances. But what is critical is, as somebody brought up a statistic, there are commercial businesses. There are people from California, other states, who are coming in and buying up properties. And they are doing whole house, non-owner occupant rentals, STRs. Those are the biggest concern for me, because in Fisher Park, they're buying up these historic houses. They have no involvement in the house, zero. I don't even know who the owners are. They don't come through. We don't have driveways. I don't have a driveway. My neighbor across the street has a shared driveway. Plumbers, construction people rent the house. They block their driveway and the neighbors. I took pictures of where they block the driveway. Am I going to go over and say something to them? Am I the responsible party to say you're blocking parking? You parked in front of my house. Where am I going to park up the street? No, I'm not. I'm a single female. I live by myself. That same morning, I didn't approach these guys about the parking. I let it be. But that morning, I get up, I work out at 6 a.m. in the morning like a crazy person. I'm sweaty. I come home. I'm walking my dogs. I get catcalled by these construction guys. God only knows what they might have done had I said something the night before. My neighbor was out of town, so I was texting with her. But this distance needs to be controlled because I have a full-time job. I don't also need to police my neighborhood with parking, with other violations. So let's go to the wording of U2, where you state 2 or more verified violations. It would be critical to define verified violations. From a lawyer's perspective, we can argue anything could be, or because you don't define it, nothing is a verified violation. What's verified? Is it the sole parking? Blocking a driveway? Is it harassing a woman in a neighborhood as they're walking through? What are those? What are those that should suspend or write up a violation so that that house can be considered, marked on the record? The other one I would just point to is section 4. Change the word to or. Or is critical. Read it. Change that word to or from an attorney's perspective.
Thank you.
That's critical.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody who came out this evening. I want to thank you for your patience and for allowing this special meeting. I think it has given us an opportunity to speak with neighbors and those affected parties over the last few weeks, and I'm glad that we're able to sit down and talk about this ordinance in a better atmosphere than how long that last meeting was. We would have probably been here till 11 or 12 o'clock. So I just want to say thank you for your patience. We appreciate that no matter what side of the issue you're on, this is difficult. I do need a motion to close the public hearing. Moved by Mr. Matheny, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that passes 9-0. I'm sure there are lots of questions and comments. Mayor Pro Tem?
I know that this council has worked hard. We got the copy from the legislature about short-term rental, and a lot of it we disagreed with. And I know we've worked hard to try to make it as fair and as just as possible. I think I don't know how successful we would be on some of the issues that I've heard from you and that I too agree with, like the owner occupancy, the owner should be there. That is, I don't think it's in the legislature, is a legislative thing, but also I know the distance is much better than no distance. 3 football fields is pretty much what it is. Though I'd like to see it a little bit longer than that, a little bit more than that, I can compromise. And parking on the street is another issue that I'm concerned about, especially on smaller streets in neighborhoods where there's not a driveway or anywhere off the street to park. Could cause some issues, but overall, I want to say to council, though I voted against the distance, I know we've worked hard to create what we have here, and to be as compassionate and as concerned and thoughtful about neighborhoods as we could be.
Thank you. Mr. Holston, and then Mrs. Thurm.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also want to reach out and say thank you to all the residents who've come out and spoken this evening. It's just wonderful to see democracy at work when folks can come and express their viewpoints, some supportive and some in opposition to, but all working constructively to try to help us build the very best that we can build. I am in favor of what we're doing. Having previously served on the Board of Adjustment and also Planning and Zoning, recognizing that we were in a state of flux. There weren't any guidelines, yet the activities were still continuing, and so it was important that we step in with the support of the community to help to make a difference. Very happy for the changes that we made early on. But I go back to one of the speakers tonight. I think his name is Chris, who brought up a couple of things that I've also been wondering about that we should look into relative to those who have already been approved through the process that was in place. But then also looking at when this process does begin, how do we pick, quote unquote, the winners and the losers? Is it the first one to the courthouse, so to speak, or is there going to be some type of lottery system such that everybody has an opportunity to get one of the zoning permits? Because if you just think about it, if you have 200 people trying to get in and they're all in the same street, how do you figure that out? Then also at the same time, I think it was also mentioned by Chris, what happens if I apply, I'm exuberant, I'm ready to go, I sign up, but then I decide, whether by omission or whatever else, that I'm not going to do it any longer. Does it stay with me regardless for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Or is there some kind of process in place that's going to allow a coming up for air and a looking at it again so that other folks, maybe my next door neighbor wants to do it but can't get in because I'm in, and I don't know. Just maybe that's the getting into the weeds of it all. But I think it's going to be important for the purposes of equity and fairness that we have some answers to those so that we can have the very best process that we have. Other than that, I am supportive, but just operationally making sure that we put those things in place. And thank you, Chris, for bringing those things up.
So, that is the dicey issue, and that's what we have been trying to balance. And you use the bad word lottery because that is what the Schroeder decision was in Wilmington, that there couldn't be a lottery. And we're really threading the needle here because in that Wilmington decision, it said there could be no caps. And we've heard from you loud and clear that you want this distance requirement, and we are willing to take that risk by doing the distance requirement, but knowing that that could come back and be claimed as a cap. But we've heard what you want, so that's what we're going to try to do. I don't know if it's the city attorney or the planning department who can talk about the race to the courthouse, and if there would be Board of Adjustments here. I'm not sure. The issue that Mr. Holston brought up, maybe you could clarify.
I'll address one aspect of Councilman Holston's concern about the zoning permit. So you can, if we said you had to get this permit every year, that would probably run afoul. But if we said, but as part of our third-party vendor, we ask them to check up and verify information, and then we find that it ceases to operate, or people will tell us, I mean, not everyone's going to hide it, we will check it that way. But that's part of the third-party vendor to handle this information for us, because as we know there's 600 already, as you can imagine, that would be a lot, and that's part of what the data tracking we would ask them to do.
And so these zoning permits will not run with the land, is that correct?
They run with who applied for it.
I believe they do. I really did want Sue to respond to it because it's really more of an operational kind of point. But as I, advised, this area of the law is not mature. There is a single statute and a single case. It will likely develop, and the way that law develops in America is either through legislative action by cities and the state government, or by lawsuits.
I believe what we said was that if there is a change, that it had to be reported within 30 days, which means that that permit would then cease. Therefore, in my non-legal opinion, if the permit ceases, then the new person would have to apply for a permit.
As I said, that's a more operational question. It sounds like you're correct.
Thank you. And by the way, the use of the term lottery was a loose term. It was not a strict term.
Yeah, I understand. Mrs. Thurm, followed by Mrs. Hightower.
Yes, you all have just recently spoken about my comment, and that is that this is evolving and this is changing so quickly in the state that I view this as an interim step. I don't know that this is the ultimate. I think, as the mayor said, we are pushing the envelope on something that we're not sure whether it's going to fly or not with the distance rule. We've decided that we are willing to take that chance because we feel that that's an important component. We may get shot down on that. As others have said, legislation is moving through Raleigh right now that may change all of this. But we felt like because this was happening, whether we had any regulations or not, we had to have a starting place. So I view this as a starting place and a first step. I personally would like to see some other things in here that aren't in here. I think as a council and as a city, we aren't ready to push the envelope and invite trouble, so to speak. But I think as each city in North Carolina establishes these rules, and as the courts test them and we progress, that we will come back and we will modify this further. But this is a first step. It's not the end of the story. And for that reason, I feel it's important to vote yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Hightower?
Thank you. And I think Councilwoman Thurm kind of went into some of that. But one of the main caveats for me was the separation. I heard a lot of that from the community as well. Without the separation, I won't support it at all. Affordable housing period, housing attainability is critical to a community. And so if they're totally swept up by all just short-term rental, then I'm concerned that our neighborhoods won't have spaces for people who really do need it. I understand the importance that is short-term rental to some, and I understand it's an income generator for some. Can we find a happy mix? I'm still not sure if we can find a happy mix here. Because in the neighborhoods that I've heard from, the negative that they've experienced from some of the rentals where people leave out on a weekend and they leave all the trash in the front yard. All of the stuff just there for neighbors to have to deal with. So I think for me, it's critical that with this zoning permit as well, that there's contact information attached to it to make sure that there's someone to contact. And perhaps, I don't know if that information can be posted in the window, just saying property management, doesn't have to have a name or whatever, but for concerns, issues, contact this number, because oftentimes people don't talk to their neighbors, and so they don't know who to, contact and talk to. But I think the community should have a way to have this addressed. Is that possible? I know we're all concerned about Wilmington's case, but I think we have to try to do some things here that are creative, that are going to help ensure some security for the neighborhood within this regard. Separation is number one, tantamount, but then making sure that there's contact if it's not going to be owner-occupied. Is that something that, Tony, you feel we can do? Just, even if we just post it, that's not violating anybody.
Not in the ordinance.
That's not a violation of anything. I mean, we do it all the time, so.
I would suggest it not be in the ordinance per se, but be in the permit process, because if you're looking, you're just basically looking for some contact information, which our intent was as the third-party vendor would have that information online for people. So, but I'm also respecting that not everybody can go online, so we can look at best practices of how, because you don't want to sign, a signed sign, but something that gives some general information so that gives people some comfort of who they can contact.
Right, we can't always assume everybody doesn't go online. Or
exactly, that's how we look into this.
So I'm not trying to stigmatize anything, but I think if you're putting these in residential neighborhoods, then I think when people realize what's going on at the property, if it's an issue, then they have someone to call and a way to call. If it's not an issue, nobody's going to call. Hopefully everybody will go in respecting the neighborhood and that people live there as well. So my other question is, and someone brought up this about living room sleeping, having someone sleep in the living room. So if you're having 3 bedrooms and 1 car per bedroom, but then you got sofas in the living room that'll pull out that someone could sleep in, how would that fit? You can't just presume that a child is going to sleep there. Another adult could sleep there. So would that mean another car? So then you got 4 cars per sleeping quarter? Am I interpreting that wrong?
I think we did say living spaces are exempt. Maybe Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, I believe that's right. Whose bedrooms only.
So, and that will be in the ordinance?
The ordinance specifically says a room furnished with a bed and primarily used for sleeping that includes at least 1 clearly defined exterior exit, door or window to allow for escape in an emergency. Does not include common living areas not furnished with a bed on a regular basis.
So a living room would be a common living area. But even if
not a regular bed, not a sleeping, not a pull-out that you could dress up, as we've seen in some, I've seen in some Airbnbs, they have the pull-outs. So I wanted to be clear on that, because then you get into 4 adults per sleeping quarter, 4 cars, just a clog up of the neighborhood. And then the last one, I think we removed the owner occupancy. I remember that. Okay. And the enforcement, that's my final one. How are we going to ensure some of this is enforced?
Because as I brought up before, we have trouble enforcing some of the things we already have on the book when it comes to code enforcement, noise enforcement. So how are we going to enforce these regulations?
It's enforced by complaint. So it's a complaint-based system. So I would suggest that it's very thoroughly enforced. It's going to be enforced where there's a problem.
And when they complain, who would they call? Planning and zoning. And correct? I wish you all would stop trying to talk so low. You know I can't hear.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
And they got to hear too. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No. It's Mary Kay, followed by Mrs. Hoffman, followed by Dr. Wells.
Learn how to be patiently wait your turns at. Learn how to wait your turn. And I'm gonna time you. No, not you, Mary Kay, but him.
Yeah, and my turn. So, I am personally thankful that we are putting some regulations. Right now, we have no idea, honestly, how many STRs we have. We really don't. We're estimating 600. There could be a lot more, there could be less. I really, as I think Mrs. Thurm said, this is a start at least. I really feel for the people in the townhomes, though, who are having to share a wall. That could be so distracting. You're trying to live your life. You bought your home, and then you've got all this noise going on next door. If it's an STR, at least you will be able to call, and someone in the area has to be responsible for this, if I'm reading it right. That someone has to be able to come and take care of the situation if it's too much noise or things like that. I think a lot of this, for me, it goes back to, I think we know that sometimes people advertise for parties and places, things like that, and they promote that there's going to be a big party at X place. Come to find out that's an STR, but that is prohibited in this, and there will be someone who can be called. Of course, the police can be called, but there will also be a way to get a hold of the person who is managing that. So am I 100% happy with everything? I'm thrilled with the 750 feet. That is quite a bit. Unfortunately, that doesn't take care of the ones that are already in existence, but it does help for future. So I'm going to be in support of this. I still think there are some things we need to look at. Personally, I'm worried about, are there carbon monoxide detectors? Are there fire I'm worried about those things as people rent and have appropriate lodging. So, there's a whole lot of things I think can still be looked at, but at this point, I am going to vote in favor of this.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoffman.
I would really just like to thank the citizens of this city who've spent a lot of time in discussion and providing some input to the ordinance that we have under discussion this evening. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me to meet with a group of several neighborhoods, and then even over the last week or so, I've been working again with one of our groups that really kind of guide us to thinking about and specifying tonight the 750 feet distance and the need for appropriate insurance, and again even the one-night minimum that we spoke about tonight. So all of those changes have come out of serious discussions that we've had with homeowners and citizens here. I would say to the couple of people who spoke tonight regarding their HOA, HOAs have a tremendous ability to control what goes on in their homeowners associations. So if you live in a homeowners association, either run for the board or hold your board to the fire in terms of what they are able to do there. So, again, I thank all of you for the input and for the discussion that we've had this evening.
Dr. Wells, followed by Mr. Matheny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm pleased with the discussion because we got to hear what you're thinking. We were able to hear what you're thinking, and I'm so glad that we just took this time to have this special meeting to discuss it. But the thing, I'm throwing another curve. I'm going another way. The thing that I kept hearing was my neighborhood, my house. And I wanted to know, and my neighbors. The question is, who is your neighbor? So I looked it up. Google tells you everything. So it says someone living near you or fellow man. Greensboro is a welcoming city. Greensboro is growing. Things are changing. Who is our neighbor? The neighbor may live in India, Africa, another state, and they come to Greensboro. And one of the someone mentioned it tonight, that they had a guest who had been one of those traveling nurses. Those nurses go all over the country wherever they are needed, and they're there for a certain length of time. But affording a hotel room for that time is out of the question. I'm planning a trip, and they said your incidentals when you come for these 5 days is $500 for incidentals. Then there's every night you pay. But someone who's coming to do a good deed at one of our hospitals, coming to do something for us, and we don't want them in our neighborhood. I just want us to think about that. Who is your neighbor? Your fellow man. My next town hall, I'm going to invite you all early, but my theme was We Are Neighbors. It's the 15th of June at, we're going to have it, isn't it Bennett? We're going to have it at Bennett. And that's what we're going to talk about. Who is our neighbor? Things are changing so much. People are changing. Things are changing. Greensboro's changing. And we're going to have to adjust, or we're just going to be out of sorts most of the time. So these changes that are being made in the ordinances tonight, I know everybody's not happy about it. But let's see if we can adjust so that we can be that community that is a welcoming community, that the people next door, and some people who are saying my neighborhood don't know the person that lives right next door to them, don't even speak to them. But they say, my neighborhood. Let's start thinking about being neighbors to each other and respecting our fellow man. That's my take on it. Yes, I'm supporting it. I'm supporting it, but I think it is to help us as a city.
Thank you. Mr. Mazzini?
Real quick, for the folks that said they want to continue to fight, it's Senate Bill 667. It's not just up here. Honestly, what the mayor did in the beginning of the meeting with support from the council was to put more teeth into an ordinance that otherwise the teeth wasn't there as much. The teeth is going to come down at the state. That's going to dictate a lot of this. And so I just encourage you, we get complained to a lot or supported sometimes, but the state, there's a lot that happens up there, folks, and I'd encourage you just to pay attention. And I too, you know, I heard from residents, I heard from short-term rental owners, and I think that we all came up and the staff came up with something that's a good, happy medium. Well, not everybody's happy, but we're happily miserable together. It's good, so let's roll this thing out, let's pass it and move on.
So I'll finish it up. I actually was going to say exactly what Mr. Matheny said, and that is to look up Senate Bill 667 so you can see what the idea is of the legislature. Reach out to your legislators because they are the ones who will determine the path of short-term rentals, and it is very important that they hear your voice. I don't think that they hear your voice as often as we do. So I would truly encourage you, especially the people in our delegation, to let them know how you feel. Let me see. Homeowners Association was mentioned earlier, and what we do does not supersede what a homeowners association, their covenants and restrictions. If short-term rentals are not allowed in certain neighborhoods or townhomes or whatever, this does not override that. It is that homeowners association, but it is up to the homeowners association to enforce their covenants. So they are an important use for you, and I would encourage you to reach out to your homeowners association and see what those restrictions are. One thing that we also have to add is that the start date would be January 1, 2024. Believe it or not, that'll be here quicker than we know it if we add that to the bill. I want to say one thing. A lot of people have said that Greensboro isn't a tourist destination, and maybe being mayor, I take it a little personally. There are a lot of great things in this city that people come for. Just a couple. The Tanger Center. We all see what has happened with the Tanger Center. The world-class acts that the Coliseum books. The Aquatic Center, that is busy all the time. Bryan Park is busy. The Science Center, it's one of the top 10 sites visited in North Carolina, and we believe it'll be in the top 5 this year. The great festivals that we have that go on throughout the entire city. Graduations, whether they're high school graduations or one of our local 7 colleges and universities, all of those graduations. Parents' weekends are some of the biggest weekends. Youth sports, it's absolutely amazing the number of people who come in this city, in this county for youth sports, and not to mention the Wyndham Golf Tournament. When you look around and see all of the attractions that we have that people from outside of Guilford County take advantage of, that's where a lot of people are spending times in short-term rentals. A lot of the actors that are in the Tanger plays are staying in short-term rentals. When parents are coming in for long weekends, a lot of them are staying in short-term rentals. So while we may not have the mountains, we may not have the ocean, we've got an awful lot in between. And I am very proud of what Greensboro has to offer. We have to strike that balance on how to welcome everybody in and protect those neighborhoods. We are in the middle of enormous growth, and we are feeling some growing pains right now. That is one reason why we had to enact something when it came to short-term rentals. So again, I want to thank you for your input, and I hope that you see that we heard you by making the changes that we did. We will revisit this the 1st of 2025 after it's been enacted for a year. We'll look at what's worked and what didn't work and make adjustments as we need to go along. So I believe we have a motion by Mrs. Thurm and a second by Mr. Matheny. If council is ready to vote.
I don't have a vote screen.
Sorry, the computer's a little slow.
I don't have a vote screen.
All right, Mrs. Hoffman? Yes. Mrs. Thurm? Yes. Dr. Wells? Mayor Pro Tem?
Only if we don't look at it into a couple of years.
I promise. Yes. I am a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader? Yes. Mr. Matheny? Yes. Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Yes.
And that passes 9-0. Thank you. We do have one final item on our agenda. You don't have to stay and listen to it if you don't want to. We'll give you a couple of minutes to exit the chambers. If you want to stay, we're more than happy. This is what we're going to vote on next. Can you what? Yeah, I'm just waiting till people exit, so.
Move the item.
Wait, I got to read it. Item F1 is a resolution authorizing commitment for permanent supportive housing project 2701 North O. Henry Boulevard. We do have one speaker, and that is Mr. Philip Marsh.
I've been working on this for years.
She has.
I was about to say, I have one comment before this is over.
Yes, on this. I did move the item already.
Tony, while Mr. Marsh is coming, quick question. Did you insert what I asked you about in the ordinance? Do I not see it?
Regarding the intent to continue beyond 20 years?
No, the other, or you just took them out, the voucher piece.
No, we said housing vouchers or the equivalent. If you look in the two whereases from the bottom, should housing vouchers or their equivalent not be available?
You may not have the most recent copy.
He did. I think this is it. Is that? I think I found it. Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you. I got it, Michelle.
And your request for the 20 years, Councilperson Hightower, is the last whereas. The intent to operate beyond 20 years is the last whereas in the resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I have a quick question. This is an agenda item, so I get 5 minutes, right? I thought you get 5 minutes. Talking about right? I mean, you don't get. I don't get 5 minutes on the agenda. No. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll just ask a question. That's all. Thank you for clarifying this. You know, it's an education every time I'm here, so I appreciate it. You know. But yeah, I mean, you know, I just want to understand I'm the only one here. And, you know, first and foremost, Mayor, we had a conversation that relates to this back in February. Really don't appreciate, I felt like I was lied to in that conversation with you and the mayor. I mean, excuse me, you and the city manager. That conversation really went nowhere. And so I felt like it was a waste of my time to even attend that meeting. But I just want to continue to sound the alarm. You know, we have probably one of the most incompetent people that is kind of running this conversation in Michelle Kennedy. Do not have a lot of faith in her and, you know, what she has already done. And this city is being ran into the ground. This is a very serious issue that we are dealing with this homeless situation. I definitely understand that. And as Dr. Wells said, you know, these are our neighbors. When this pallet home situation was done and grossly mishandled, this brought people from all over the country to our city, and then those people that were just unceremoniously kicked out into the cold, if you will. Pardon the pun on words. And so again, you know, these situations are very serious. I don't feel like we put our best foot forward. And when we have these serious issues in our community, you know, we're talking about $3 million. That is not, you know, a couple of pennies. That's real money in the community. And when that money is, you know, appropriated in the fashion that it seems to be done in this city, the taxpayers always seem to be worse on the backside of these things. So now we're discussing picking up the slack of another failed project, and these are real world implications from this. You know, the county is getting ready to destroy that community where they're talking about purchasing that school. These things have real world consequences. The IRC had people at Pomona where it was staff that was providing security. That we're doing accounting tricks with the police department where we don't have enough police to police our own communities, and we just keep adding on to their plate. Again, like, we really need to get competent people in these conversations, and I feel like that never happens because of how you administrate, Mayor. And I mean, it just really is not acceptable to a lot of people in this community. And, you know, there will be conversations going forward to continue to critique what this city council does with regards to addressing these issues.
Thank you. I do want to say I take strong exception to the word lied. And the way I remember it is we were waiting for you to, nope, time is up. Time is up. That we were waiting for you to get back to us because you suggested a land swap and that you put forward that you had possession of that property and you would be able to facilitate that land swap. Looking at GIS, it was quite apparent that you didn't. And we asked if you... My business partner's right there. My business partner is right there that I own the property with. That is a lie. Again, you lie so much. You lie so much. That's ridiculous. Your time is up. Your time is up. I mean, that's ridiculous. You're not going to sit here and lie, though. No, I am telling the truth. You are not.
I just told you.
So if you have a partner and you want to do a land swap, then bring it to us. That's what we asked for.
So who do we talk to?
You come back to the city manager and I who had the discussion with you.
And we'll get this done because you really don't want to have me keep complaining. I mean, this is ridiculous. I will call him tomorrow. You ain't got to hear from me.
We need to talk to the people who own the property.
He's right there. You could talk to him right now.
That's great. You put it in writing.
You can spend more money on a failed plan by Michelle Kennedy again. You could talk to us right now. Because when I emailed you, you did not return my email. So I mean, yeah, you get people that's mad whenever you lie. So again, I'll contact the city manager tomorrow. But you do lie, and you know that. You can sit here and smile all you want. You know you lie.
So I have to say that the meeting was with the mayor that day, but I invited myself to join, and I'm glad I was there. And
I'm glad you were there.
Yes, I'm very glad I was there.
Please leave.
But if Mr. Marsh will send that information that we requested of him, I will be happy to take a look at it.
In regarding pallet homes, I think they were a success, and people have come from all over to see how that application was and what those pallet homes looked like. Got off to a little bit of a rocky start, but we know that we'll be able to reuse them many times over the next 10 years, and I believe it will get better and better. So thank you for your leadership on that item.
Every new program starts off slow.
I think we do already have a motion, unless you said you might have had a quick...
No, I just wanted to say on behalf of our staff who've been working on this, and for many of you who I know have worked on this personally for a number of years, we're grateful for the leadership of council on this issue. It's a critical one that I know many of you have been sitting right at the table for years as we've been working to this place. So excited for this item tonight.
Thank you. We do have a motion by Mrs. Thurm, it's second by Mr. Matheny. Council, please vote. Tori, are you waiting on anyone?
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Hightower.
Okay. Mrs. Hoffman. Mrs. Thurm.
Yes.
Dr. Wells. Yes. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm a yes. Mrs. Abuzawader? Yes. Mr. Matheny? Yes. Mr. Holston?
Yes.
Mrs. Hightower?
Thank you very
And
much.
that passes 9-0. Thank you. Moved by Mr. Matheny, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 9-0.